Stacy Shigaya. I am I'm the moderator for this panel, and I want to also welcome Carl Ishikawa and Janet Umezu, who will be participating as well. We have information we'd like to share with you, and we also want for this to be a dialogue this morning for our session. So what I'm going to do is tell you the outline for the agenda for our time together, and then we'll get started with the program. So we are going to have some introductions we're going to self-introduce and share our stories with you. Then we will be sharing information with you about the Family Acceptance Project, and that will allow you to have some tools that you can use to support your loved ones and the LGBTQ+ community. And then we'll have an open discussion where you all can either ask questions in the chat, or if you'd like to take yourself off mute and ask a question, please feel free to do that. We do want to make sure that that we are answering whatever questions you may have. There is no such thing as a silly or a dumb question. If it's your question, then it's important, and we are happy to be able to answer it. But we also are not, we're parents, we're not experts in this field, and so we will provide you information that we can, but if there is something that we can't answer, then hopefully we can help you get the answer you need after the session is over. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Janet.
Good morning. I am Janet Umezu, and I want to thank the committee for allowing me to speak today. When I'm usually asked to give a talk, many times I'm somewhat reluctant to do so. But it is my children who always encourage me to speak up and remind me of how important it is to be seen and hear other parents' stories, as it made me feel less alone when I was dealing with my issues in learning that my daughter identified as male instead of female, and the coming out of my lesbian daughter. That is why I think allyship support is so important. It helps to make an individual or a family feel less alone, safe, and supported. Today, I hope I can shed some light on the process of acceptance that a family may go through, and the important role an ally may have in the acceptance process. It's been almost 13 years since I began this journey into the LGBTQ issues I faced. I am a mother of a lesbian daughter, a transmasculine son, and a cisgender daughter. It is my children, family, and friends who have taught me much about what love and acceptance means. For if you had met me 4 or 5, 6 years ago, I would not be able to talk about my journey without becoming overly emotional. Today, my emotion comes not from pain, but from deep gratitude for the life we live today. I am a 4th-generation Japanese American who lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. As my kids were growing up, I did not feel that my family was any different than any other Japanese American family. However, with one exception. My husband is a Buddhist minister. I begin my story with Norio. He was assigned female at birth, and even though for the first 25 years of his life, he was seen as female, I have come to see him as my son. So as I talk about Norio's life, just know that I am using his male name, even though he may have been seen female during those years. My journey began in 2009. Life seemed to be going as I had envisioned. My oldest daughter, Amy, had started her career in living in LA. My second child, Norio, had just graduated college and was looking for employment. And my youngest child, Michelle, was just starting college. That year, Norio, who identified as female at the time, came over to the house and came out as lesbian. Norio explained to my husband and me that he had planned to spend the holiday with his partner and her family. Although taken aback, we told him that we loved him and gave him a big hug to reassure him. After he left, both my husband and I looked at one another and said, "We didn't see this coming." but it did seem to explain something to me. While Norio attended college, he became distant from the family, and it seemed he only came home during the holidays. And even after graduating, when he returned to the Bay Area and lived only 20 minutes away from us, he seldom dropped by or allowed us to visit. That feeling of not understanding his distance left a big hole in my heart. But that slowly changed once Norio had come out and once again became part of our family lives. At the beginning, I really struggled internally with Norio's coming out as lesbian, which kind of surprised me because I always thought I was sort of an open-minded person. But I found that I did not want anyone to know. I'm not sure why. Within time, I came to terms with Norio being a lesbian and was willing to talk to some family members and close friends of Norio's coming out. I was so fortunate to have received their support and understanding. These were the people I talked to when I was feeling most vulnerable. Although I began to share this with family and close friends, I definitely did not want to share it with anyone outside my close circle of friends. Maybe it was embarrassment or shame, as I did not know of anyone in my Japanese American or Buddhist community who had a lesbian child. Or maybe it was being fearful of being judged since my husband was a minister. After some time later, Norio again came out and shared that he felt male and needed to live his life as a man. Although in shock, my husband and I again told Norio that we loved him, but honestly did not understand. Norio later explained that he had always felt this way. I wondered how I did not see this. I was struggling to process everything and felt very confused. My husband told Norio, I know you see yourself one way. Mommy and Daddy see you another way. But it is going to take us some time for us to see you the way you want to be seen. But it does not mean we do not love you. Please give us some time. Norio thought that was a fair request. To be honest, it took a long time. So many questions and thoughts swirled in my head. How did I not see this? Who is this person now? Does he not realize the difficulties he's setting himself up for? But despite all of those questions, this time, although I still had fears about being judged and maybe gossiped about in my temple community, I did mention what was going on with the temple member that I had known for a long time. This fear of being judged came out as I came out to this person. And their response was, oh my, I don't think I could accept this for my child. I feel so sorry for you. This person made me feel like I had a problem, and I feared others would react in the same way. And again, I hesitated to come out to other people. Norio could see my struggle and offered resource materials, counselors' names, and even suggested I watch a video on Facebook of a woman named Marcia Izumi, who was also a Japanese American mother of a transgender son. As I watched and listened to Marcia's words, I could relate to all the things she was saying about feeling embarrassed, ashamed, and confused. Her words reflect the feelings I was experiencing. And I thought to myself, at least there was another Japanese family out there who was going through what our family was experiencing. And that thought somehow brought me much comfort in knowing that I was not alone. That is when I realized that encountering another parent who was going through similar experience helped me to feel that I was less alone. It also helped me to come to truly accept my children as they are. In hindsight, I also thought it ironic that my son was supporting me by offering resources, counselors, etc., versus the other way around, in me supporting him. One of the hardest things for me initially was to use the pronoun he. When referring to Norio, even today, I continue to slip up from time to time. And I still am a work in progress, but at it, But at the same time, I do all of this to honor my son for who he is. I know that it seems like I dwelled on Norio's coming out, and I have, because it was the most difficult one for me to come to terms with. But a few years later, after Norio came out as lesbian, my oldest daughter, Amy, came out and revealed she was in a lesbian relationship. I was surprised how natural and accepting I was of her coming out. But I know my feelings of embarrassment or not wanting others to know would have surfaced if I had not gone through the experience with Norio first. As I stated before, it's been almost 13 years since I began this journey into the LGBTQ issues I faced. I have become comfortable enough to share my story without falling apart. I feel that I can see my children as they really are and happy to see that they are living their authentic selves. It is equally comforting to know that they are surrounded by such loving and supportive people. Norio was married in 2014 to Liz. Amy is with Marie and married in 2018. And recently, Michelle, my youngest, married Ruben on April 30th of this year. All of them were surrounded by family, grandparents, and friends who witnessed their declaration of love to one another. My children seemed happy, and what more could a parent want for their children? And in October 2019, my husband and I became grandparents as Norio and Liz had their first child, Madi. Life is good, but it seemed that it took me a bit of time to get here. And as I reflect about the past, what helped me the most was the allyship of my own children and talking to other parents who were either going through the same experience or had already gone through the experience, and to boot, they were all Asian in ethnicity. And even though these people were from different faiths, it was through sharing their stories that I realized that I was not alone. Feelings I was experiencing were not uncommon. It helped me to work through my issues and come to accept and to see my children as their true selves. As it turns out, as I have shared my story within our Buddhist community, I have encountered other parents who have a gay, a lesbian, or transgender child. And to be honest, my husband and I were absolutely thrilled when we first met another couple within our Buddhist community who had a transgender child also. It brought much comfort to know we were not alone and had another family we could share our thoughts with. And that is what I think an allyship is all about. A way to show people within the Japanese American LGBTQ community and their feelings and their families that they are not alone in this journey and struggles, and to feel supported and to let them know that in the end, love prevails. Thank you. And now Carl would like to share his story. Thank you. Carl.
Thank you, Janet, for sharing your story with us. So many thanks to Marcia and Okaidi for today's invitation, and to Cody for the technical support, and certainly Stacy and Janet for supporting me here today, and of course all of you for sharing your time with us. So I'm Carl Ichikawa. I'm a proud father of two daughters. One is transgender and one is lesbian. And I'm a sansei living in Chicago, where my daughters are in LA. So for those of you who may have been at the Okaidi conference last fall, you met my youngest daughter, Gia Gunn, who shared her journey, which started being born as a biological boy, started, of all things, Japanese classical dancing at the age of 6, in which it was actually common for young boys to dance the female role. Gia came out in high school as a gay male, not real surprising to us. And then shortly after, she started doing drag, and which is traditionally males as female entertainers. And kind of the watershed moment for her and for us as a family was she auditioned and was accepted onto RuPaul's Drag Race. And so she was a season 6 contestant. And several years later, she came back on the All-Stars edition of that. But while she was performing drag, it was shortly after that really she decided that her true identity was that as a woman. And so she began her transition. And I remember the day when she called me, not to ask Dad, but to tell Dad this was her decision. And I committed one of those classic parental, mistakes looking back. I asked the question, but are you sure? Well, of course she was sure. That's why she was calling me. And I will admit that, perhaps it's a little bit easier road for me because at that point, Gia was a young adult, fully capable of looking at all her options, and this was her decision. So, for us as a family, there was a certain naturalness to seeing Gia present as a woman. So actually, when she decided to transition and changed her gender markers and went through all of the legal things, it was kind of a culmination, at least for that segment of our journey. So, but she's very happy with her true identity, and that, as a parent, is what all of us are looking for. My second daughter is my eldest daughter, Erin. Only recently found her true love with another woman, and like Janet, we'll have apparently a wedding, in our future here in December. So we're very much looking forward to that. But Erin is a single mom, as is her partner. And so in short order here, we're going to be the happy grandparents to two very energetic kids. So, but again, seeing Erin's happiness, is the only, not affirmation, but I mean, it comes as a great comfort as her father to see that, she's living her authentic life. And for that, we're very grateful. I think as Janet related, and many of you can, maybe identify, in the beginning, I didn't really talk to other folks, not even family members. And so I did start to read, grab things off the internet, get some books, try to become self-educated on this, what for me was a wide-ranging and sometimes confusing, phase for all of us. But as Janet reminded us, we're not alone. You're not alone. There are community members, family, fellow allies, and we're all people just like you. We have the same dreams and fears. We go to the same church. We work side by side, and more likely than not, we're your neighbors. But it does take courage to explore and to reach out beyond our comfort zone. But that's how we can all take the next step. So if you are uncomfortable, just imagine how it must be for your child or friend. For myself, I started to identify as an ally at work. I was in a large corporate setting. There was a ally subgroup. And so I went to one of their meetings, and I remember pinning a ribbon to my cubicle. I felt like, okay, I finally, took that first step. Such perhaps a small step, but for me personally, it was really my coming out as the parent of a member of the community. So I started to attend other events at work, and strength does come from being able to be with others, talk to others, hear their stories. And pretty soon, you start to genuinely feel and understand you're not alone in this journey. So a bit later, I did an interview for our church newsletter along with Gia. Now, this is the church, the Midwest Buddhist Temple of Chicago, that I grew up in. My grandparents and parents were founding members of that church. And so, while the response to the newsletter was limited, it wouldn't be accurate to say, "Oh, hey, Carl, that was a great story." But there was also, I didn't hear any negative comments. And so I think very much keeping with the Nikkei community, folks just didn't say anything. But a few folks did come up to me and say, "Oh, it's nice to know because one of my kids is a member of the community," or, "We're so happy to hear your story." Ironically, my brother-in-law is also a Buddhist minister. And so, there maybe have been a momentary thought about, oh, is this appropriate for within the church setting or not? But he and my sister were certainly, were great supporters for our kids. And so I think that also helped the membership, kind of, oh, okay, thanks for telling us, move on. So, but for me, it definitely helped break the ice because I publicly came out to the membership. So whatever they knew, whatever they saw, this was kind of the official statement, my official statement. So, we talk about journeys, and for me, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. We've gone through the initial coming out of our kids. And as I mentioned, perhaps that was a little bit easier because they were young adults. And so it wasn't so much, being part of the discussion as being accepting of their decision and listening to what they were saying to us. But, you've already taken the first step by just being here today. And many of you are much further along in your journey than I am. But just know that we're all here to support each other and the ones we love. And so, thanks for allowing me to share my story. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Thank you so much, Carl and Janet. We really appreciate you all sharing that. So my story is a little bit different than Carl's story and Janet's story. I'm a straight cisgender female. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I'm a third generation Japanese American, and I have two amazing kids. They're both in their 20s. Yikes, but they are. And my son is a straight cisgender, and my daughter is cisgender and pansexual. So the story of how I became connected with Okaidi and with the LGBTQ community begins with my daughter. When she was in middle school and high school, she had boyfriends, and when towards the end of her high school career, she broke up with her boyfriend and then started hanging around a new person that I knew because I was the band food mom. And if anybody out there has ever have kids in marching band or were in marching band yourself, you know that if you're the person feeding these kids, you're the most popular mom out there. And so because, I'm feeding the kids, so I get to know them. So I had a lot of comfort level with my daughter's friends, and a lot of them I knew were a part of the LGBTQ community. And so she would go to Pride Fest with them. And I was really proud of her for supporting them. I always welcomed them as her friends into our home. And she knew that I didn't have any issues with her having friends who were in the LGBTQ plus community. So as she started spending more time with one friend of hers, I thought, well, let me take you guys out to dinner. And so we go out to dinner, and the restaurant had booths. So they were sitting really kind of close together. And I could just tell by the way they were relating to each other that they were more than just friends. So I feel like that was something that was really a kind of a benefit for me to be able to kind of figure out what that my daughter was dating another female. And I had time to process that before she actually told me. So when she did tell me I think it was probably a month or so after I took him out to dinner, she said, Mom, we're dating. And I said, yes, I kind of figured it out when we went to dinner. And I just want you to be happy, and you both look happy. And the person that she was dating, I knew to be just an amazing person. And so I said, I'm really happy for you. And I think probably after that, it was like, okay, what are we having for dinner? I mean, it was a really short conversation. But then maybe a couple of months after that, I knew they were still dating, but then my daughter said that her partner was transitioning from female to male. And then she said, Mom, and I'm pansexual. And I honestly had never heard the word pansexual before, so I had to ask her to tell me what it meant. And when I talk about what it means, I try to remember to make sure to say, this is what it means for my daughter, because I realize that other people who identify as pansexual may have a different definition. And so my daughter's definition is that when she looks for someone to have as a partner or is attracted to someone, it's from the inside out. It's more how they treat people, what kind of person they are on the inside. And then she looks at, the outside and whether or not they're male or female or have transitioned, or that element, that latter element is not that big of a deal for her. And so that's how she defines being pansexual, which in a nutshell is basically she is attracted to someone's sort of spirit first, and then their outward appearance and their sexuality second. So again, I think because I was hung around my daughter's friends a lot because of being in the band, her being in the marching band, I kind of knew that her partner wanted to transition. And so I asked if he had support and if there was anything I could do to help, and that I wanted both my daughter and her partner to know that I would be here for them. And so we had a pretty smooth conversation and coming out period sort of. And one thing though that I didn't realize that came to be later on, and Carl kind of touched on it, is we as parents and family members have a coming out period that we can either choose to proactively have or passively have. And I didn't really think about that at the time, but I work for Sakura Foundation here in Denver, and our mission is to support Japanese and Japanese American heritage, culture, and community. So we had invited Marcia Izumi to come and do a session for us with her book. And this was before my daughter came out to me. And then subsequently, we asked her to come out again with her son Aiden to talk about her book. And then I had sent an email to Marcia saying, as a fellow mom in the LGBTQ plus community, I really appreciate what you're doing for us. And so she had asked me to do a panel with PFLAG Denver. And of course, no one can say no to Marcia. And I'm so grateful for her and that I know her and that she's just enriched all of our lives so much. But I said, I need to ask my daughter first out of respect for her. And my daughter said, Mom, you can't not do it. Huge double negative. But so I had her support and was able to do this panel and realized a lot of different things, which was the whole point of parents and family members coming out, but also for people in the community, there's always that opportunity, whether they want to take an active role or a passive role in, every time you meet someone, there's that opportunity of coming out or not coming out. And so sometimes I think for some people, it just becomes part of their lives. And for other people, it's a burden. And I totally get that. I have never had to tell someone, hi, I'm Stacy and I'm straight. It doesn't happen for those of us who are not in part of the community. So I have learned so much from my daughter, from Marcia, from everyone I've come along the way to have the blessing to meet, who are either allies or part of the community. And that's really one of the biggest pieces of information that I want to relay today. I'm really lucky. I'm getting kind of choked up right now. And I'm lucky because when I get choked up talking about my daughter, I realize I'm fortunate. My tears are tears of joy. And I know that a lot of people, their tears are not tears of joy. They're tears of sadness or rejection or feeling unloved, or feeling as a parent, maybe feeling uncertain or thinking that some things that you wanted for your child may not occur because of the way they might be treated in the community. So I think part of the reason why I get choked up and have good tears is because I've always, as soon as I became a mom, I knew that is my role. I am a mom. I'm going to try to be the best mom I can be. But I never realized how much more my daughter could give to me by being part of the community and being her authentic self. She has opened my eyes to things that I never knew that I could be better at. I mean, not to say that I thought I was perfect, because obviously I don't, and none of us are perfect, but, I thought I was relatively open-minded, like Janet said, and, progressive and accepting of other people. But until I started talking more with other people, I realized, wow, I really have a lot of growth ahead of me. And this community has been so amazing in helping me to grow and to learn from them. And that's one of the things that I really hope people who have loved ones who are part of the community realize, is that there's such a huge gift that your family members and your kids can give to you that you may not have even known that you've either wanted or needed until it happens. And then for people who really are on the opposite spectrum, where maybe they don't understand loved ones in the community, and they might be thinking, oh my gosh, I've grown up in a church that says being gay or being transgender is wrong. And so how do I reconcile all of that? I realize that's a process as well. But there's just so much that you can gain. And for people in the community, there's so much that they can give, sometimes by not even saying a word, but just by being themselves. I'm sure you all have probably run into this lately, and it makes me feel good that it occurs more, whether you're watching TV or you're in a store and you see someone who either dresses, appears to be one gender or another, but dresses in the opposite, or maybe, has pink hair and they're 80 years old or whatever, but someone who appears differently from what we as society deems as the norm. But we see people living their own lives and not being afraid to say, you know what, yes, I'm a guy, I'm cisgender, but skirts are comfortable. And actually, I think Brad Pitt wore one on the red carpet recently. But when I see things like that, it really makes me smile, and it makes me have hope for our future. Because as long as we're just living our lives, trying to be good people, not hurting anybody, then we should all be free to break out of these stereotypes that our society has said this is how a male should be, and this is how a female should be. And, if you're born female, you have to, regardless of how you feel, that's what you need to be for the rest of your life. I think we're starting to realize as a society that in the long run, just letting people be themselves is the best thing ever. And it helps all of us be better people. So that's kind of a roundabout way of finishing out my story. But my daughter has just been amazing. She's doing well. My son and daughter live in the Pacific Northwest, which makes me sad because I'm here in Denver, but I'm going to go see them in a couple of weeks. And, having Zoom, like being able to see all of you on Zoom and being able to communicate with my kids that way. It's just one of, I think, the good things that came out of the pandemic is realizing that technology can really bring us together, can help us to share our stories in a broader way. There's a lot of things on shows on like Netflix and even on YouTube and whatnot, where we can really hear stories from the person who's experiencing the story. And that hopefully will enable us to open our hearts and open our minds. And again, just be open to learning from each other, because I think sometimes sometimes our kids might think that the parents should have all the answers. And I know my kids know for sure, no, my mom does not have all the answers, and I never had them. I never will have them. But I think if we as parents realize that it's okay for us to tell our kids, you know what, you asked a good question, I don't know the answer. Or in this journey of understanding our loved ones in the LGBTQ plus community, of us being able to say, you know what, I love you. I don't really understand things yet. I'm working on it, and I'm going to keep working on it. And that's okay. It's okay if people aren't there yet and still have work to do. I think we all, in the long run, have some work to do. And so just you all, again, it's been said before today, but you all being on this call is really important for all of us to kind of move along that growth spectrum. And I think that, the allyship that we're able to have and grow from and make connections with, even if, we feel like we still have a ways to go. The fact that we're in motion is what counts. And so with that, I wanted to talk about the Family Acceptance Project with you all, because it provides some really great tools for all of us on this journey, whether we're part of the community or whether we're allies or family members. But this, so the Family Acceptance Project is a research-based project out of San Francisco State University. We're going to put some slides up on the screen in just a second of what the program is. They've developed what they call posters, and there are 3 of them. One is about behaviors that are helpful for people in the community. One is behaviors that are harmful that we as allies should avoid doing. And then there is one more that's similar to the behaviors that are helpful, but it incorporates a little bit of information about if you're presenting to either a faith-based community or a more conservative community. It kind of adds some nuances in that way. But the first 2 posters, which are on the screen now, they are both in English and Spanish and 9 other languages they've been translated into, which is really great. That the last one that I was talking about with regard to a more conservative bent is only available in Spanish and English. But the background of these posters are that they're research-based, and the point of them is to educate family members, providers, religious leaders, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer identified youth and others about the critical role of family support for people in the community, especially children and youth, in order to help prevent suicide and other serious health outcomes and to build healthy futures. And these posters can be used in churches, in schools, amongst family members, in different organizations. Basically, to me, there's no place where these posters wouldn't be helpful. And so also we'll put up links to the posters and the website so that you all can have access to them. But just kind of seeing the glimpse of these, you can see that, for example, we'll start with the one on the right, the behaviors that help, the blue and green poster. The research has shown that these behaviors are directly related to people in the LGBTQIA+ community having better health, higher self-esteem, stronger social support, better family relations, and they're less likely to be depressed, attempt suicide, think about suicide, or have substance abuse issues. And so as you're looking through those, you can see that they're really great tools. The other flip side of that, which is the poster in yellow, are the behaviors that are harmful for us to do. And so sometimes it doesn't necessarily occur to us right away that some of these might be harmful, but that's why it's amazing that these posters exist. So we find that the opposite is true for people who either are the victims of or people who do these behaviors, as far as the benefits that they had just mentioned. Flip that around to the negative, and that's what occurs, where there's a higher rate of depression, suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, illegal drug use, lower self-esteem, higher propensity for people to be depressed and whatnot. So one of the things that Carl and Janet and I wanted to do was to take one of the items from either of these posters and talk to you a little bit more about our experience with them. And so Janet, if you want to talk now about the item on one of the items on the posters that you can relate to, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. What resonated when I initially saw the poster was there were two things. Tell your LGBTQ gender diverse child that you love them. Because even though I did not understand what was going on at the time, the love that my husband and I felt for Norio did not change. And I realized that the issue lied within me to come to terms with what Norio actually, I knew was coming from a very strong place, because he had actually said, because I was like Carl and asked that same crazy question, are you sure? and he actually came out and said, yes, I am, and I think I was kind of reassured that Norio did go seek counseling on his own to get clarity for himself, because he explained to me that he needed to be strong because he knew that's probably what I was going to say, and probably try to convince them that it may have been a phase, which is one of those negative things that you see on the left-hand side. But the fact is that our love for Norio never wavered. And we knew that in order to come to terms, it was both my husband and I who needed to go and seek answers and find help. And then the second one that really resonated with me was tell your LGBTQ gender diverse child that you will be there for them, even if you don't fully understand. And when Norio came out as transmasculine, I will say, it really took us a long time. Number one, to even understand what it meant to be transgender. We had to go out and seek answers. But I will honestly say my family, even though when Norio came out, they didn't understand. But I think what was so heartwarming is, to them, that was their niece, that was their son. And when, even though my parents really didn't understand totally, well, at that point, when Norio got married, he had really not come out fully as transgender. But but my parents still wanted to go to their wedding, still wanted to be part of the process. And so that, as for me, as being Nodio's parent, was a real relief. Even though they didn't really understand, they were still there to support him. And also with Amy's coming out, they were supportive of Amy. And there is this one story that I was telling Marcia about, is that when the day of Amy's wedding, my dad and my sister were on their way down to LA, and my dad was starting to have some what they thought were heart issues. So they stopped at an ER on the way, and the doctor said, we need to keep you here for 24 hours to observe what's going on. And my father, who at the time was 99, said, no, I got to go to a wedding. I can't stay here overnight. I'll come back maybe, but I'm going to the wedding. So I think even though, it was sort of so heartwarming to me that, because he would make comments sometimes, he would see, he didn't understand, number one, that two women could love each other. He only knew in terms of gay men. He goes, oh, I didn't realize women could love women. So when he would see couples and he would ask Amy, so are they lesbian? And she would say, yes, they are. And his comment would be, oh my gosh, the world has changed so much, But nonetheless, he has accepted his grandchildren. I don't even, to be honest with you, I don't even think he thinks in terms of, Nodia as being transgender or Amy as being a lesbian. He just sees them as his grandchildren and loves them, regardless. So those two items out of there really resonated with me, is that I don't think you can shower your children with enough love. So anyway, that's my perspective. Carl or Stacy, do you all have anything?
Yeah, Carl, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much, Janet, for sharing that. So from the increased well-being poster, I wanted to talk a little bit about speak openly about your child's LGBTQ plus identity. And, I'm not talking about, oh, you need to give a public speech or, be out at the front of the, at the parade or anything. If you choose to do that, of course, please do that. But I'll share with you what, I call the family's Christmas story. So pre-COVID, it was quite common for our clan, our cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone to get together on Christmas Day. And quite the celebration, even though we're Buddhists, we don't have the religious part, but the whole, being together and sense of community and family is very much a tradition within our family. And Gia was living in, as she does now, in LA at that point. And so we certainly invited her to come, hoping that she would make it. And there was actually some hesitation. Oh, maybe it was the time of the year, she's busy, whatever. But she shared with me that her hesitancy was because she wasn't sure how the family would accept her. It was her first time since going through her transition that she would be presenting herself to the family as Gia. And so I actually was a little bit surprised by that, because by that point it was, within the immediate family, there wasn't any question that we had come to accept that and embrace the notion. So, I sent an email out to my cousins and the people who were coming, just saying, hey, glad you're coming. Gia's coming in from LA. I'm not even sure exactly the wording I used. I really should have revisited that. But the response was surprising to me, but so reassuring. And of course, from Gia's cousins, it's like, oh, of course, we know that. I mean, they were following her on Instagram and Facebook, and they were, months ahead of her dad as far as, being clued in. And for my cousins, her extended aunts and uncles, it's, oh yeah, that's great. And so just being able to share that that episode with Gia, she decided, okay, I'm coming. And so, being able to speak even to just family members, I think can also help your child or your friend, whoever you're trying to be such a wonderful ally to, can help them, kind of make the bridge. And so, out of that same experience, when we look at the behaviors that it can increase problems, if you don't use the name or pronoun that matches your child's gender identity, it can be very harmful. And at this family gathering, were there some, references to, her prior gender or, misuse of pronouns? Of course there were. But, Gia took it in her heart that, people weren't saying that out of disrespect. For God's sake, they knew her one way for their entire lives. And here she was presenting as someone different. And so, mistakes happen. It was said at the outset of today's session, if it happens, simply apologize for it. I think that's an important thing, though, because a lot of times we're too embarrassed to actually say something like, oh, I'm sorry. And yet I will tell you, again, Gia shared this story with, when the misidentification comes from a family member, especially an immediate family member, it's hurtful, it's cutting. Again, not because there's any thought that, oh, they're attacking me, but it's because it just shows, how much further all of us have to go on our journey and to make things, more natural. Now, I will say the whole pronoun piece is, it's fraught with mistakes, right? So one way that I try to remind myself and family members is to simply use the person's name, and then you're not going to get that wrong. So, simple things like that. But if it happens, apologize for it and move on, and everyone's going to be just fine. So thanks for letting me share that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Thank you, Carl and Janet. One of the items on the list that really stuck out for me was to not only let your child or your loved one know that you love them, but also that you're proud of them. I have told my daughter, she probably is tired of hearing it, but I've told her a lot that how much I've learned from being able to participate in gatherings like this, and that if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have met such amazing people. I've been really fortunate that the last in-person Okaidi conference in Los Angeles, I think it was 2018 or 19, my son came with me. And, originally I said, hey, I said, I'm going to this conference and I'm there. I want to go to Disneyland too. You want to come? And I said, I understand if you don't want to go to the conference, but let's go to Disneyland. And he's like, yeah, I'll go. And then he said, no, Mom, I want to go to the conference, because he wanted to be supportive of his sister. So that was a great thing, an amazing thing. But the other item on the list too is it says, welcome your child's LGBTQ+ friends into your home. And I did that when my daughter was in high school and would have her friends over, and again, I knew them, most all of them, but it, it didn't really have, it wasn't because I was having this conscious effort of, okay, my daughter's gay, and so I need to invite her friends as well. It was because at the time she didn't tell me, I didn't know that she was part of the community, but it was like, those are her friends. I know some of them for sure are part of the community. Some of them may or may not be, but to me, that was really not my business. And so they just all knew that if they wanted to come over and hang out, that they were welcome to. And so I feel really blessed that was just, again, I kind of had this, this transition that was a little bit smoother than maybe most people. And I do have a lot of gratitude for that, and a lot of understanding for people who have situations that are more difficult. And the other thing too, two other things I wanted to make. One is that we should all, whether we're part of the community or not, give ourselves some grace. Like Carl just said, mistakes happen. We're not perfect, and we're trying. And the part the we're trying part is what we should focus on, as well as, if you do misgender someone, again, just saying to them, oh, you know what, I used the wrong pronoun. And that message, when you say it out loud, not only acknowledges that you have some growth to do and that you care enough to say you made a mistake, but also it gives the message to the person who is misgendered, the same message. They care, they made a mistake. Hopefully, they'll work on that, but they care enough about me to apologize to me. And I think that's huge. I feel like in life, a lot of times there's so many opportunities for us to say we're sorry, and we miss those opportunities because we don't say it, whether out of embarrassment or we feel like, oh, I don't know the person well enough to say sorry. But I feel like if we all looked back on the times that someone apologized to us, probably really not very often we would be like, that was a weird thing. I think mostly we would say, wow, that was very nice that they apologized. So it's just, again, on that, just shows us growing and having concern for each other and allowing ourselves some grace. But I do tell my daughter, thank you for being who you are, which allows me to have these amazing connections and have more growth on my part. So hopefully, as you all have more time, we didn't want to go over the posters in real detail on this call because we wanted to allow more time for people to have discussion and to interact and to ask questions. So the link is in the chat, and you're free to, please do go to the website, look at the research, look at the specific elements of these charts and our posters, and find what works for you, because having tools like this is such a gift for all of us. And we wanted to, again, open it up for questions. So please feel free to call out a question or to put one in the chat. If I'll ask one question to start out with. And that is for Janet and Carl. Can you tell us a little bit about the Japanese American community where you live, and a little bit more about how it did or didn't affect your story for your family?
Sure, I can start there, Stacy. So the Chicago metro area has roughly 15,000 Japanese Americans, smaller than the West Coast, larger than some other areas. A lot of my family history is tied, as I mentioned, to the Buddhist temple here in Chicago, and which was started by the Issei and the Nisei, but it's becoming much more diverse. We're in just outside of downtown Chicago. We don't necessarily draw from the immediate neighborhood, but we're in a setting where I think people feel, very welcome. And I think so within the church community and within the broader Nikkei community in Chicago, I think there is a feeling of general acceptance. And I would contrast us with perhaps, San Francisco and some other areas that are more in a leadership position as far as within the broader community, as far as their support for the LGBTQ folks. But I don't have any suspicion or concern that there is some kind of undercurrent of, oh, we shouldn't be talking about that, or, oh, how embarrassing, or anything like that. So I would say, Stacy, at least my experience in Chicago has been one of acceptance and support.
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, I think I'd like to echo that pretty well. San Francisco is pretty much well known for its LGBTQ community. Within the Japanese American community, I think overall there is broad acceptance, but at the same time, maybe not. I think I can't say that, because the experience I had with our temple was when they had heard it initially, a talk that I gave. The people who came up to me, surprisingly, were all older people, like, in their 80s and above, 70s, 80s, thanking me for actually talking about the LGBTQ community, because they had family members who were part of that community but did not feel accepted, or the parents weren't accepting. And so they would say, oh, I hope so-and-so heard this. And it actually, once my husband and I sort of told the story about our children, all of a sudden, all these older members started saying, oh, sorry about that, said, oh, I have a gay son, or I have a lesbian daughter. It was kind of amazing, because up until then, even when we were part of the temple, they never ever said anything about, in reference to that. So, and that's why I always felt like, when my children came out at the time, my husband was not serving at a local temple, but he was the bishop, had become the bishop of the Buddhist Churches of America. And so I think that added another kind of tension to myself about, coming out with that. But overall, I would say, even in the broader sense, it was the ministers who said, hey, I think that's great. And surprisingly, the ministers' wives, especially the ones from Japan, who I thought might have a more narrow viewpoint, said they thought it was great, and it's so wonderful that we were embracing our children. So I feel, yes, there is acceptance, but there were some of those too that a little skeptical, just because they didn't understand. It wasn't so much they were so anti-LGBTQ. It's just that they just didn't understand transgender, or, well, I think they understand lesbian and gays, but transgender was something that was very new to them. So I think it was more apprehension and not wanting to say the wrong thing. And so it was basically, I think sometimes when I think about it, it was my insecurity, maybe not having trust and being open with everyone. That I will say that took me a while, to do. And so that's why I applaud you, Carl, because you're, that you were able to face it head on, sort of, more or less, whereas I kind of stuck my head in the sand for a while. But overall, yes, acceptance. And and why I say that is because I know my son and his wife, well, his wife is very strong Christian. And so, and I think going back into a community that you grew up in, and they know you for your former gender. It's been hard for the temple to make that shift, and it's hard. So in that sense, it's education. You know, I'll have to say things, and they're not mean or anything, but it's enough to make my son a little uncomfortable. So, but he still brings his daughter to church. They do both, actually. They go to both temple and to a Methodist church. And they said they'll leave it up to their daughter later to decide what they want to do. So, I mean, yeah, overall, I would say it's been pretty accepting. I think it was more my hesitation, I should say. Yeah.
Thank you, Janet and Carl. And thank you, Michael, for sharing in the chat about the community in San Jose, and that there's been a lot of acceptance. And that's really great to hear. And that means, you know, that there's all of the people who are currently accepting, that can be like this ripple effect that goes out into the broader community for even more acceptance down the road. So that's great to hear. Does anyone else want to chime in?